When I reviewed Warhammer 40k Chaos Gate earlier this year, I was overall satisfied with the experience. Despite the age of the game, it did a fantastic job capturing the feeling of being an overpowered Space Marine chapter with the Ultramarines. My experience with finally getting Terminator armor and blasting enemies to bits was incredibly satisfying. There were definitely issues with the latter half and lack of enemy variety, but I still overall recommended it. Today we are looking at the unexpected sequel with Chaos Gate Daemonhunters. Instead of the Ultramarines, you are now playing as the Grey Knights in the Alderai sector, battling against the forces of Nurgle. Is this a worthy successor to the original, or is it another disappointing 40k game in a galaxy of mediocrity? When you start a game, you can choose your difficulty and are given a opening cutscene. I'm going to refrain talking about the cutscene itself since I don't want to spoil too much. Afterwards, you're presented with the battle tutorial. If you've played the modern XCOM games or any currently strategy game that follows this trend, you'll feel right at home here. There are a few subtle differences, but it all boils down to having a handful of actions to use per turn with a 4-man army. The tutorial itself is a bit too slow for my taste and seems to go on forever, even when concluding the tutorial mission itself. One thing to note about the tutorial is the fact that Khorne enemies are featured, yet they do not appear anywhere else in the main game. I believe this was a way to give a shout out to the original game's focus on Khorne units, but I'm honestly not sure. It feels strange to create bloodletters in order to never use them again. Seems like a waste of assets if you ask me. After the tutorial mission, you'll find out that the commander has died in the name of the Emperor, and you're now in charge of the ship. I gotta be honest here, I really don't like this art style at all. It has this pseudo cartoony look coupled with the graphic fidelity of an early Xbox 360 game. It looks bad, and the animations in the cutscenes definitely do not help. Next, it's time to equip your squad and head out to your first mission as a commander. Depending on what class each Space Marine falls in, will determine the types of weapons and armor they are able to equip. Most of the time, they will have a bolter and one of several melee weapons equipped. If not, they will have a two-handed weapon. Alongside that, I recommend for your Marines to carry grenades, as they are absolutely crucial to crowd control. As mentioned previously, you'll be fighting the forces of Nurgle. This involves Chaos Cultists, Marines, Plague Bearers, and a few other creatures thrown within. Because of how many you'll face at a time, a trusty grenade is the best way to clear many of them out. Not only does it do a great amount of damage, but it can also knock enemies out of the map entirely. It's a great use of the environment. Unfortunately, you can only use frag grenades once per mission, so the rest boils down to tediously whittling down the health of your enemies. Even Chaos Cultists take far more hits than expected. Mission variety is also pretty low. Each mission usually boils down to killing Nurgle forces that contain shards or destroying a plague plant in the area. Throughout it, a bar fills up on top each turn, and when using weapons points or WP for extra powerful moves. Once this is full, a random negative modifier will occur, either spawning more enemies to fight or lowering the health of your Space Marines or something else entirely. I personally am not a fan of this inclusion, as it just feels like an arbitrary way to lengthen the mission. Combat is already far too long for its own good, so adding something like this only worsens this issue. After each mission, you're given a summary on how everyone has performed. If anyone sustains too much damage, they will suffer an injury. If they have an injury, they will suffer penalties until fully healed. This is definitely a challenge early on for how low level everyone is, as well as your equipment, but after a while this doesn't become an issue anymore, especially as your barracks expand with new Space Marines. Your Marines are also given experience points in which they can use to unlock skills in their skill tree. You'll definitely want to spec out your character wisely, as respeccing your character is not a very simple process. Outside of battle, you'll have to upgrade your ship and assist in the research performed by Inquisitor Vakir. You'll also have dilemmas to deal with, as each choice can result in a benefit or a drawback. All are pretty standard, so not much to talk about here. Every 30 days, you'll also have to report to the Grand Master to upgrade you on your situation, along with responding to various questions and conversation pieces. You can also increase the quality of equipment rewards you gain per mission. This is definitely important to help in the fight against Nurgle, so I recommend using your requisition points wisely. Similar to XCOM, most of your time will be spent waiting for the next mission to appear. If you fail to complete a mission within a certain amount of time on the campaign map, the section will gain Nurgle corruption. Unfortunately, there aren't really many ways to reduce this outside of putting up a beacon. which you only have a limited amount of. I wish there was a way to take a more proactive approach to reducing corruption instead of waiting for another mission in the area to do so. I want to do all I can for the Emperor, so why can't I do more? For the overall narrative itself, I find it to be overall okay. My biggest gripe is just how unlikable Inquisitor Vakir is. Myself and Old Man Ector have always supported basically everything she's asked for, yet she treats us like we're impeding her progress every opportunity we get. I even stick my neck out for her when talking to the Grand Master, which can be deemed as heresy by some, yet it seems to be quickly forgotten about the next day. I also don't get how she can get mad at Ector at all. The dude is like an awesome grandfather that everyone would love to be around. I assume she gets better over time, but I couldn't be bothered to finish this one to see it happen. Even if you like the combat and want to play as some of the Nurgle units, there unfortunately isn't any multiplayer to speak of. That's a shame since there's not much that can be done outside of the main campaign. A solid multiplayer mode would have been a fun way to experiment with different units and come up with some interesting scenarios against friends and randoms. With how big DLC is nowadays for any game with some financial success, I am shocked that nothing has been released yet. If they can add the other gods in via an expansion similar to XCOM Enemy Within, it'd be incredibly exciting. The tutorial already showed Khorne units, so that is most likely to happen, I guess. The developer hasn't really been too active with much of post-launch support, so who knows the state of the game, honestly. And speaking of support, I ran into a few game-breaking glitches myself. One in particular involves a cultist killing himself running into his own explosive. The game then just refused to progress into my turn, effectively forcing me to restart the entire level. Considering how tedious the combat is, I was not looking forward to it. Unfortunately, I just cannot recommend this one. It has a very slow start and takes far too long to get going. There aren't a ton of additions to the modern XCOM formula, which I'm honestly getting sick and tired of at this point. The enemy variety is somehow worse than the original, and much of the presentation is very underwhelming. I really wanted to like this one, but it just felt soulless and downright tedious. Hopefully the next 40 game I take a look at will be an enjoyable one. Thank you guys for watching as always, and this is Powerhouse, signing off for the Emperor.